I only used 3 colors plus white to complete this painting. Using a limited palette like that makes color mixing decisions much easier. And that's because there's far less variables. Here's my 16 color palette, and think about how many different possible combinations there are using these 16 different colors. There's 3 shades of blue, and there's 3 shades of yellow, and there's different reds. There's a lot to choose from. But when you use only 3 colors, the choices become much simpler. I'll start by mixing the gray, and that's pretty straightforward. You just mix Burnt Sienna and Ultramarine Blue, and that makes black. You have to get the ratio right in order for it to be truly neutral, but we don't really need it to be perfect. That looks like black, and I can add some white to it, and that should make gray. So here's a color that's almost the same value. The print is more magenta, but we're not looking for perfection here. It doesn't matter if this color is perfect. What's more important is how light or dark it is, and I think that's pretty good. Next, we'll do the table color. And as I said, we could use mostly burnt sienna and a little bit of white. And I do think that would pass as a wood color. I mean, it's not that far off. See how simple this is? There's just 2 colors and you already have a pretty close representation of the wood color. But like I said, I would like to get a little bit more of that warmth in there. So just add a touch of this yellow. And I think that helps. Maybe a little bit more burnt sienna and some more yellow. There's going to be different shades for this table. It's not just one color. Like, it gets darker and more saturated in the back. So I would say that's a pretty good color to start with. And like I said, I think I'll mix up a larger volume of this color. That's one tip that I have too. If you're not sure how to mix a color, start with a small batch. That way you can figure out which colors need to go into it and what the basic proportions are. It might take a little bit more time to do it that way, but if you make a mistake, you're not wasting large quantities of paint. So I mix up this batch on the right a little bit darker, just in case I need that later. Might be a little bit easier if I rotate it like this. So with just these 3 colors, we already mixed the gray background and this warm brown color for the table. Next, I'll show how to mix the different shades of blue for the coffee mug. If you want to try painting this coffee mug for yourself, I have a reference photograph and a line drawing that you can transfer to your canvas. It's all part of a complete step-by-step course. There's a link to it in the description below. The blue of this coffee mug is mostly ultramarine blue. It does need some white because it's too dark. See how much darker that is? This might not be the exact shade of the blue, but we'll use whatever this color turns into. It's actually not too bad for the coffee mug. For the darker section, we'll just add more of the ultramarine blue. You might have to add a little bit of the burnt sienna to make it darker and a little bit less saturated. So that is like a darker blue, but we need it more of like a black. I'll take some of the ultramarine and burnt sienna and mix it together. So that is quite a bit darker. When you use a limited palette like this, you can't expect to match colors perfectly. You focus more on the value. Is that as dark as this color here? Maybe it needs to be a little bit darker. So that's about the darkness of the top part of this handle. As I said, the blue is a little bit different, but that's what we're going to use. I'll start with this blue, and that's pretty much the color in the center here. Since I'm right-handed, it's easy to paint on the right side of a line, like I just did here and here. And when I'd like to get the other side, I could just flip it over. That way it's just as easy. It seems like there's part of this rim that gets lighter, so I'm just leaving that white for now. And this line represents, as I said, where it starts to get darker. I'll start picking up this color that's in between, and usually I just sort of put it in there. And as it gets darker, I start picking up the darkest color. This is where a softer brush comes in handy, and you could just soften it a little bit. So you could soften the edge like that. Now, if you don't have a brush like that, you could just take like your nylon round, and you just sort of like run it over where the edges meet. If you'd like to see a full blending demo, I have a YouTube video about how to blend acrylics like oils. The link is in the description below. I'll just go ahead and fill in the darkest shadow areas on the body of the mug. One way to tackle a painting is just to think about breaking it down into different sections. So you notice I did the background, the table, and even with the subject, I break it down into different shapes. So I focused on the main body right here, and now I'm focusing on the shadows. I think I'll focus on this lighter edge and then work my way to this reflection down here at the bottom. So I would take some of the main color and just add some white to it. I'll just go ahead and fill that in. So I'll move on to this section, and it's just slightly lighter than this area. So you take that blue and add just a touch of white to it. That should work. So this blue color goes all the way down here, and it goes along the bottom. But I also think it's the same color of this handle. So I'm going to put in all of this bright blue color on the handle. Just take your time and fill that in. This top section is looking more solid. I might come back and fix a few things, but so far it's looking better. That's the beauty of this, is it's the same basic color formula of ultramarine blue and white. So the only time that burnt sienna comes into play is when you need the really dark section. The rest of this, it's mostly white and ultramarine blue. And that's what makes this simpler. If this blue was made from like 3 or 4 colors, it'd be hard to transition it like this. So I need that to be a little bit lighter, and I just pick up some white, put it in there, and I can pick up some more of the darker color, paint it next to it. The more difficult area is where the table color reflects on there. And like I said, you just pick up some of the table color and mix it with the blue. The fun part is putting in these white highlights. It's what makes the mug look glossy, but you have to be careful not to overdo it. There are a number of tiny highlights. I don't know if I'll put all of them in, but adding a few in there gives it a little bit more glossiness. Here's the finished painting. Using just 3 colors makes the color mixing much simpler. And you can still create what looks like a full range of colors. If you want to try this painting yourself, I've put together a full course with a reference photo and a line drawing linked in the description. Next, you could check out my videos about blending acrylics. Thanks for watching.